It's time to look at the weekend newspapers, and to help me make sense of the headlines, I'm joined by the editor of the Sunday World, Makhudu Sifara, as well as communications specialist, Themba Sepetokele. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us in the studio. It's a great pleasure to have you, Makhudu. It's been a long time. Welcome back to the industry. And of course, you came back with a big bang. Tell us what you are leading with in your paper and what is of interest in terms of the political stories that you have sought to highlight.
Good morning. Thank you, Karima, for having me on your show. The lead story in Sunday World this morning is about the battles that are going on at Mamelodi Sundowns. The coach and the head of the or somebody responsible for organizing supporters, Alex Shakwani. They have this battle that has been going on, so we go into the detail of the battle about the Pitso Must Go campaign and how the club has not been performing well recently.
Do you think he's going to go?
The situation is a bit volatile. He might. I don't know. You know, obviously, I mean, no decision has been taken. It could go either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But politically, we zoom in on the three critical things. The first is the DA. They have an election that's happening today. And the second is the spy wars that have been underway, and the request by the Minister of Intelligence to answer the question about whether she gave an illegal instruction or an instruction to the head of the domestic branch to tap the phones of a person without authorization from a judge.
And she wants to do that now in, of course, secret.
Yeah.
Themba, what is your view on that, given the fact that, you know, the Secret Service already has quite a lot of cover? It is difficult to get transparency in there. Does the minister have a case for having to answer that allegation in secret?
Perhaps maybe let me start by saying whether she has a case or not. There are stories that are quite disturbing that are in the Sunday World. The two stories that are disturbing that are pointing to two ministers, to two female ministers. And such stories talks about reputation, actually. So how are they going to manage it? Because that also puts pressure on the president, to be honest, because this story has been dragging forever. And you find another story in the Sunday Times about Minister Esisulu. So you find yourself actually three female ministers who are really needs to look at the kind of credibility that they do have. The third minister is the Minister of Agriculture and Land Reform, Dr. Diza. Makhudu's paper is carrying that kind of a story. I read it 8 days morning. I said, what a load that President Ramaphosa has on his shoulders to really deal with these three ministers. This issue on them is quite about credibility.
I'll come back to the stories that you're talking about, because there's obviously history there as well. Those ministries have changed hands quite a lot. But let's take a look at the City Press this morning. South Africa's weapon tech stolen. Now, this is, of course, you know, quite an explosive headline, and the story talks about the fact that Denel has effectively sold off some of our technology to the Saudis. Makhudu, do you think the City Press does a good job of outlining the case against Denel? I mean, we have people here that are quoted but that are not named, and we of course know that if we make allegations like this, the story needs to be watertight.
Yes. I mean, the difficulty, I suppose, for the newspaper is that an investigation has just gotten underway. So there isn't too much detail, other than the fact that there are people who negotiated with a Saudi company, and in the process of that negotiation, it appears to me that the Saudis used that negotiation to understand for themselves who is responsible for what that relates to their own interest, and then recruited those people to their end. And in the process of that recruitment, then took with them quite a number of state secrets That's why the allegations that are contained in there are very disturbing.
Yes.
You know.
Now, of course, it ties in, Themba, to the story that was carried a few weeks ago that Denel had sold not just the Caspers to Chad, but also the patent, and not sold, but given it actually over. So there's obviously something rotten at Denel, and we mustn't forget that the Denel institution was, of course, earmarked for state capture. It was used to advance the cause of a particular administration. And it looks as if a lot of those problems are still plaguing that state-owned company.
Yeah, also it's about the issue of credibility. And one is clear that the president has actually intervened that the SIU should begin serious investigations into the matter. If then it was one of the projects of state capture, then hopefully they will also have to be called to account before the Zondo Commission. One hopes that they should also tell us what we should know, actually.
Absolutely. Makudu, let's go to the Sunday Times headline. It says, rape ruling shocker. And of course, the magistrate gives a father who raped his 11-year-old child a suspended sentence. Now, how does this sit with the tough talk that came from the Justice Minister and from the President of the country that people who are found to be guilty of sexually assaulting and raping women and children will actually get life sentences? What do you make of this ruling?
No, it makes a mockery of the tough talk that, you know, talk is cheap. And it's not really in the public commitments and you know, the conferences that we go to and pledge solidarity, but it's actually in the actions that follow those conferences and the tough talk. But I suppose the redeeming thing is that the Magistrates Commission is looking into the matter, and there's resentencing that's going to go into that matter. But
yeah.
But on the surface, it just sort of gives you an idea of how much work still needs to be done. In the week when Uinene's killer is sentenced, you say on the one hand, this is the justice system working as it ought to. But is it working as it ought to because there's pressure? Which is a point that I make in the column in the Sunday World.
Exactly.
Because, you know, there's a whole campaign that followed the killing of Uinene. But on the other hand, where there are no campaigns and where there are no hashtags, am I next, what then happens is this kind of cases where the cameras are away, reporters are not paying attention there, you know, the magistrates just do as they ought to. But the leadership of the country need to make sure that the things that they say, the public commitments that they make, are manifest in their actions. In the same way that you were asking earlier, should Minister Jojo be allowed to answer the question in private? My answer is a clear no, because there are way too many things. You know, if you remember the book that was launched last year, there are way too many things. About $1 billion stolen from illegal instructions happening at state security. It's a mess.
Yeah.
And now, if the question, and it's a simple question, did you as minister give an illegal instruction or not? The explanation can go to the private, yeah, these are the considerations. But is the person responsible for political leadership, for the state security, issuing instructions that are counter to the law?
Yes, and I think that is probably the central issue here. Now, it takes us back to the question of broken institutions. So you have leadership changes at the top, you have all these rah-rah speeches, but the manifestation of the change isn't really filtering down to where it matters, whether it's a magistrate that must make the right ruling in terms of a rape case, or whether it is a minister that must actually be transparent and account to the nation. Let's go to the SAA strike. It's been dominating news headlines, Themba. It says here in the Sunday Business Times, Mayday as SA strike bites. Now, we know that international flights have continued. But here's the question I want to put to you. This organization is bankrupt. People are not even sure that private equity partners will be interested because the battle has been lost against SAA for a long time. Workers are saying they're not prepared to take the brunt of the belt tightening. What about management? Do you believe that this strike is actually going to break the bone of, or the back rather, of the debate around whether SAA should in fact just be gotten rid of? Does it strengthen Tito Mbowene's argument?
To be honest, you know, I've just followed even their meetings yesterday and trying to really understand whether SAA can stand on its own without a bailout or not. But also people, when we talk about this kind of bailouts, but there's so much corruption apparently that has happened also at SAA. So people have to account, unfortunately. Look, we had the CEO who never lasted for too long, but the workers are now demanding him to be reinstated. What the reason why he left, we don't know. So the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, should also come and give us that kind of confidence and talk to us in confidence what actually is happening at SAA. This is also the issue of credibility. The image of the country is entitled, to be honest, to have a line like this to be on strike. So,
Makuru, you know what is interesting for me is that we've had monopolies both in the public sector and in the private sector. I mean, SAA is a monopoly. In the private sector, we also have monopolies, and both are unhealthy. So government is trying to inject competition both in the private sector and in the public sector, because it takes away the ability for people to get over familiar, for accountants to look the other way when people are stealing. This SAA strike, one Labour analyst called it South Africa's Thatcherite moment, where it literally means whether Cyril Ramaphosa has the guts to break the back of the unions. Can he afford to do so, given that he came on, into power with that very narrow margin, with strong support from organised labour, albeit NUMSA is the union that is not necessarily part of COSATU, but workers have actually brought Cyril Ramaphosa to power in the ANC.
No, I think, and this is a thing that many people have been asking of the president, that the president needs to come to the table. The president needs to be clear what he wants to do, communicate it clearly, and then go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be, and it has become that he sits in the office and he looks at, the balance of forces and say, can I afford to do this? Can I, what are the ramifications for the NGC, which is around the corner? All manner of things. And I think that kind of thing holds us back.
Yeah.
The president must put his foot down and say,
and act decisively.
Act decisively.
Okay, gentlemen, we've got very short time. As we're sitting here, the Democratic Alliance is electing a new interim leader. That leader is most likely to be John Steenhuisen. What is the DA's prospects under John Steenhuisen? Themba, 30 seconds.
I'm sorry, they really gone backwards in terms of race. They are not going to run away from the issue of race, that the DA is just a white party, nothing more, nothing less.
Makuru?
It's a mess, and I'm sad not just for the DA, but for our country, because, as Themba says, it's just going backwards.
So the ANC has the gift of weak opposition.
Exactly.
And it is their race to lose. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time. Well, you've had your fix for the week. We will see you next Sunday. Thank you for watching.